I do want to turn it over to the folks from Drop LWOP. Life without parole is something that is very deadening. Just to kind of transition from your remarks, I think, Susan, one of the big barriers in this society are the barriers of the prison walls that really interfere with communication. And one of the great fears in our society is a great fear of people that we somehow think have to be locked away and prevented from being part of our society. And so I think it's really important to break down those walls and to understand that any of us could be on the other side of them. So I'm not sure who's going to be leading the presentation, but we have a number of people. Kelly, you are? Okay. So I'll turn it over to Kelly, and she can say more about the group and the folks who came on with her. Go ahead, Kelly.
So I have the benefit of being next Susan, so I'll say that was absolutely amazing. I need to think outside of incarceration more, and so this was absolutely amazing, so thank you for that. I obviously deal with all of this, but most of my focus is inside. So for those that weren't there at the beginning, my name is Kelly Savage Rodriguez, and I'm formerly incarcerated, serving life without the possibility of parole, and was blessed to be commuted and now out in the community, continuing to advocate for people inside. And part of our team, we have several different subcommittees that deal with different aspects of the sentence and how to work and support and help people. I'm blessed to work directly with people inside, both at the men's and women's institutions, having an opportunity to help them directly towards whatever their relief may be, whether it is just coping with their time, maybe they're new at their time, or working towards release, whether it's courts or commutation, a lot of individuals going to board. But my passion, of course, is to end life without the possibility of parole. I also work with the Anti-Death Penalty Coalition as well. Facing that sentence, I definitely understand how difficult it is, and glad to know that you guys are working with them as well. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our lovely team who's going to start the presentation, and then I'll be back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa, and I'm part of the outreach team for the Drop LWOP Coalition. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to see how it goes because my computer is having a little bit of a hard time handling Zoom and the presentation. So we do have Linda as backup if need be. So let me know if you can see this. That good?
Yeah, your screen is up, but yeah, I do want to turn it over to the folks from Drop LWOP. Life without parole is something that is very deadening. Just to kind of transition from your remarks, I think, Susan, one of the big barriers in this society are the barriers of the prison walls that really interfere with communication. And one of the great fears in our society is a great fear of people that we somehow think have to be locked away and prevented from being part of our society. And so I think it's really important to break down those walls and to understand that any of us could be on the other side of them. So I'm not sure who's going to be leading the presentation, but we have a number of people. Kelly, you are? Okay. So I'll turn it over to Kelly, and she can say more about the group and the folks who came on with her. Go ahead, Kelly.
So I have the benefit of being next Susan, so I'll say that was absolutely amazing. I need to think outside of incarceration more, and so this was absolutely amazing, so thank you for that. I obviously deal with all of this, but most of my focus is inside. So for those that weren't there at the beginning, my name is Kelly Savage Rodriguez, and I'm formerly incarcerated, serving life without the possibility of parole, and was blessed to be commuted and now out in the community, continuing to advocate for people inside. And part of our team, we have several different subcommittees that deal with different aspects of the sentence and how to work and support and help people. I'm blessed to work directly with people inside, both at the men's and women's institutions, having an opportunity to help them directly towards whatever their relief may be, whether it is just coping with their time, maybe they're new at their time, or working towards release, whether it's courts or commutation, a lot of individuals going to board. But my passion, of course, is to end life without the possibility of parole. I also work with the Anti-Death Penalty Coalition as well. You know, facing that sentence, I definitely understand how difficult it is, and glad to know that you guys are working with them as well. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our lovely team who's going to start the presentation, and then I'll be back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa, and I'm part of the outreach team for the Drop LWOP Coalition. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to see how it goes because my computer is having a little bit of a hard time handling Zoom and the presentation. So we do have Linda as backup if need be. So let me know if you can see this. That good?
Yeah, your screen is up, but yeah, there we go.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to give just a little bit of context for life without parole in California, and then turn it back over to Kelly because she has so much personal experience and she can really tell you about the emotions behind a life without parole sentence. I have a video. I'm a little afraid to even start it because I think it's gonna throw me offline. We will, if there's the ability to share this link, it's a really powerful video, and maybe we could send that out via email later to all of you. As people have mentioned so far, life without parole really is a slow death sentence. People are deprived of hope, family and community. And I think in a very, very small way, the pandemic has shown us how important it is to have those connections. And we're all have a little bit of insight on what it feels like to be isolated. They have no chance. If you have a life without parole sentence, you cannot appear before the parole board. You can't show that there's any change. If you're sentenced when you're 20, when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, you can't show that any change in your life has taken place. Unlike the death penalty, there's no opportunities to appeal your sentence. And a lot of people do consider it to be death by incarceration. So over the last several decades, starting in the 80s, life without parole as a sentence has really skyrocketed. It wasn't something that was used very frequently in the 70s or earlier. You can see starting in 1992, it quadrupled by 2012, the number of people with life without parole. And that was at this point even a decade ago. And life sentences are increasing as well, life with parole sentences. But you can see life without parole is just growing by leaps and bounds, even over other life sentences. And even though violent crime is dropping, you see California are the number of people sentenced to life without parole is jumping in a huge, huge way. To give you a little sense of the numbers, over 5,000 people in California are sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. And a vast majority of those people, it was their first and only conviction. There's over 53,000 people in the US that are sentenced to life without parole. And then what is interesting, especially for us in California, is that we're one of only several states that make up over half of the life without parole population in the US. So it is really a big problem for us here, particularly in California. Life without parole rose because of tough on crime politics throughout the US, also because of ballot initiatives that at the time seemed to maybe promote public safety, but the reality was they had unintended consequences of really making mass incarceration a huge problem. There's also death penalty reform. A lot of people who were advocating for the end of the death penalty offered life without parole as a more humane alternative. And what that did is it really opened up life without parole as an option for sentencing. So in California, the district attorney has significant power to decide how they're going to charge a defendant. And there are a lot of different options available to them, in part because of the ballot initiatives. They can add things called enhancements or special circumstances as well that increase a person's sentence if that person is convicted. So because of the variety and the amount of charging options and the discretion that a DA has, two defendants that in almost the same exact situation can be charged with very different crimes with very different sentences. And as a result, people with less power to fight overly punitive charges are more likely to receive a life without parole sentence. So almost 7 out of 10 people sentenced to life without parole in California are Black and Latinx. And throughout the country, you do see that people of color are disproportionately affected by life without parole. It also impacts youth disproportionately. So 6 out of 10 life without parole sentenced people were 25 years or younger at the time of the offense. And increasingly, we're understanding that people under 25, their brains are not fully mature and they're not completely aware of the consequences. They're not thinking through the consequences the same way as an older person is. And the most common age for people to be sentenced to life without parole in California is just 19 years old, so just past being a juvenile. And then they have absolutely no chance to show growth or change. And they could be spending up to another 70 years in prison with nobody to look again at their sentence. A vast majority of people, like I said before, have been sentenced to LWOP, and it was the first conviction they ever had. So they don't have a history of any other crimes. This information is from the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, and through surveys, what they've found for people sentenced to LWOP in the women's prisons is that so many women were also victims of abuse before they were convicted. A lot of times as well, the women, almost 90% of the women were considered aiders and abettors. And so they were not the actual perpetrator of a murder, but they may have been forced to be there by an abusive partner. So life without parole does not make us safer. People who have been paroled after a life sentence are very, very rarely convicted of another crime. And also people who are over 55 have almost no chance of being convicted of a crime. The Drop LWOP coalition is very focused on the individuals and giving individuals another opportunity to have their sentence looked at. We think that the sentence itself is inhumane. But from a more calculated standpoint, the sheer cost of locking people up forever is enormous. And it's drawing resources away from ways that we could really increase public safety and community safety for everyone. So, you know, keeping someone in prison costs $150,000 a year as they get older. About 450 million is spent to incarcerate people every year with an LWOP sentence. And over the course of a person's lifetime, if they are sentenced to life without parole, the sentencing project estimates that it could be $1 million just to keep them incarcerated. So we're looking at $5 billion for the California 5,000 people who are currently serving LWOP in California. So this group of women in 2017 are all at the California Institute for Women, and they're all serving a life without parole sentence. And to me, this photo in particular just speaks volumes. Why do we have to keep all of these people in prison for the rest of their lives? So those were just to give you a little bit of a context for the problem of life without parole in California. And now I'm gonna have Kelly start sharing her story and her experiences. And Kelly, you can just tell me next.
Okay. Great. Can we go back up one slide just real quick? We did have some really good news as of this morning, probably any minute now. The front row, we have one of our ladies being released today and coming up here to San Francisco. In the front row, most of them in walkers, as you can see. The one in the red vest, that's a medical vest that she has to wear. She's going to, her name's Miss Velma, and she's going to be released today. So I just felt that was like extremely important to share. She'll be coming up here to our domestic violence program here on Treasure Island in San Francisco. And I just wanted to share that amazing news because that's extremely rare. There's several ways that we support different people trying to get released. And one of them is with progressive DAs. And I heard a little bit about that earlier. We have the opportunity to look at conduct while in prison. And I'm absolutely blessed to say that working with CHESA has given us an opportunity to look at a few of the individuals who have served multiple years. She served 38 years, and they looked at her behavior as well as that it was a domestic violence crime, and she's being released today. So it's absolutely amazing. So the next slide is just a picture of me that, part of the Drop LWOP position allowed me the opportunity. I worked with the California Coalition for 15 years while inside, and I kept pushing for just the acknowledgement of serving the sentence and being so silenced. So the reason I say that is because if you're on death row, you have an opportunity for legal assistance, but if you're walking death row, which is basically what life without the possibility is, in inside community, when you're there, you're limited on so many areas that you don't get the opportunity to have like basic things presented to you, whether it is something as simple as a vocation or a job that will help you pay for yourself. And so being denied something, I believe at that point it was college again, like my third time fighting the fight to get into college. And I just was fed up one day talking to my other advocates from CCWP, and they're like, there is a lot of ways that, you know, LWOP just limits your access. And, you know, maybe we should look at that a little bit more. And little did we know it would turn into a whole coalition with over 100 different organizations involved, and, you know, encouraging and motivating people inside to continue that hope. I never thought that it would reach out in this amazing way. And so luckily when I got out, I kind of pressured them for a job maybe, and have been blessed to be working from the minute the program would let me. I have been working with the coalition and of course people inside. I want to go to the next slide and talk about one of our individuals. We have, for women, we the numbers is 5,200 people serving the sentence, probably more because every day we're facing more people being sentenced extremely. But with that, we have 200 that are women. And so this individual, Christina Martinez, is newly out, commuted by Governor Brown as well. And her situation was really unique because she still has small children at home and was able to absolutely change their entire existence one afternoon because she just walked into the house. The kids had no idea that she was going to be released. They were in school, virtual school. And so she waited until there was supposed to be a break, waiting outside to surprise her kids, because she didn't want their hopes up, because this sentence is so difficult that we have a hard time having that opportunity to encourage our families when new things come about, because the process is so slow that we don't want to upset or hurt our family members by the delays and in the process. So she ended up surprising them. And I asked her for a quote. She just going to the program Monday because it's so hard to get into programs. Luckily, Parole allowed her to stay with her family this whole time. But she's going to the program on Monday in Sacramento, which will be an amazing opportunity for her. However, it's still a transition because the kids want her home, of course. And the youngest is 8. Oldest is 13 and knows everything about anything, helping with everything. It's, little simple things of taking her, her mom to go get a driver's license and do that kind of thing. So we've been really extremely blessed to have Christina as part of the movement from start to finish. And so her quote is, being sentenced to LWOP feels hopeless, unable to work most positions because she's an LWOP. And she was punished for her crime, but also punished for being LWOP. And she was told that she didn't matter a lot of the time. And the reason that is we definitely understand the system wants people who are about to get out to have access to vocations and education, things like that. But however, it shouldn't exclude and have individuals who are serving the sentence barely existing in the institution. So basic jobs are yard crew. So you work for about an hour in the morning and then that's it for your whole day. Or you might be a porter, but you can't learn anything that's going to keep you being productive unless you're able to maneuver into a position for maybe a clerk So if you're like a clerk in an education building, you might be able to motivate and work with people on a daily basis, but you can't get a good paying, like a mentor job or a job working in their prison industry. So it could be fabric or dental, things like that, because of your sentence. And so having a job like that would allow individuals who don't need to depend on family as much, because then that creates a whole nother set of hardship. So does my family make sure I have hygiene, or does my family make a trip out to visit a female? And most of the time they're going to, try to make sure that they're safe in their prison community. And so they're going to send that hygiene item instead. And that creates a dynamic that makes it really difficult, because they lose a lot of family contact. And so there's so many things about the sentence that that limits an individual. So if you have, you want to, your case involves maybe a need for boundaries and self-esteem, and you're trying to get in a group for that. If someone that is not serving life without is on that list, or a new person wants to get in, they get in before you do, unfortunately, because they want to make sure that those people have an opportunity to get their healing and their growth. But these individuals want it just as much. They're not eligible for a lot of different programs inside, like I said, college. I had to fight, I think about 5 times total before we were able to get into college. And mind you, this is you paying for your stuff yourself. It's not like the institution's paying for it. It just, they want to limit the access for someone who they deem is, unrehabilitatable. It's not going to better their numbers to show that they're not recidivism. And I get that, but at the same time, those people are still in the community that needs hope, that needs encouragement. It's a violent place to be, and to say, you're the leftovers is extremely difficult. They're not eligible for resentencing. So even if I had an opportunity to get in a group, I can't get credit for that group, even though I'm there. Even though most of us as LWOPs are the ones that facilitate the groups, that create the curriculum, it doesn't matter. So we're not able to get most extra support in that way. As you see on this list, one of the things is you're not eligible for medical parole or compassionate release. So if you are unable to provide for yourself, the state is providing for you, and you can't get that additional support. Maybe at the end, I would love to talk to you guys about my bill on medical parole and compassionate release that we're working on right now, because it is, we are treated so different than everybody else and unable to get just the most basic things. So I want to talk about the next slide, which is as they started organizing for Drop LWOP, they started doing different rallies and different active groups were involved to try to advocate about life without. So if we can go to the next slide, you'll see a picture of one of their amazing rallies. And so this is just one of a couple different rallies that we've had in Sacramento talking about it. These are family members that have gotten involved and tried to advocate. Kids who are coming to speak about their loved ones. Yes, it's a great photo of some of the people. And I work with a lot of those family members now. For women, families get involved, but not in the same way as for men. You have a lot more support for men than you do for the women. And so it's amazing to see some of these individuals, but a lot of it is, teenage kids fighting for their moms to get out of prison, and a lot of wives and mothers fighting for their husbands or sons and daughters. So it's really amazing to have them involved. As I said, when we first started talking about what it was like to be an LWOP inside, they came up with an idea, which is the next slide, and it is about organizing against the sentence and talking directly with individuals inside about what it was like to have this sentence. And so it's called the Living Chance. And if you guys go to our website, you can actually watch a slideshow that has actual audios from people inside. It was a large fight, but we were able to get to a point where we could do an audio recording of what it was like to have this sentence and know that there was no way to do anything different. And when we were going through this process, it gave voice for the first time to a lot of individuals who had no voice. And we were blessed enough to have an artist take individual photos of us and draw it for different portraits so that we could then get it out to the community so they could see it, the movement in a different way and understand that in every single situation, they're people, not just numbers. We hear so much, it's about making the community safe, but the reality is we are the ones that are creating the healing inside. We're the ones that are moving people forward to see progression in their lives and see why they made choices that they made, whether it's in the groups, whether it's in our mentoring. We do everything that we can to help and motivate people. And so we wanted to see the people that we actually worked with and how we're motivating and assisting people instead of just looking at the number, looking at the individual. And on this actual slide, I just want to point out that we have 5 that have been released, I believe 5, and 2 that are pending. So I just think that that's important to point out and amazing, because movement makers inside are about healing, growth, about looking at rehabilitation and looking at their own accountability, as well as helping others work towards accountability as well. And so knowing that I helped start that movement, I never thought that it would help launch a campaign as amazing as this, with so many different counterparts involved. And you could see in the next couple of slides all these different organizations that are absolutely involved in supporting, as well as motivating people inside to see that there's people that are listening, there's people that care. A lot of us didn't realize that inside. It's not that we didn't think we were important to ourselves, but we definitely didn't think anyone in society cared. We are the forgotten people. So we thought that everyone wanted to see us, die. Often we hear from staff, the only way you're leaving here is a toe tag, and that it holds in your heart and your soul in a different way than somebody telling you you're worth something. You hold it differently, and that trauma stays with you. I have one of my friends who blissfully is out. She did 17 years before they finally admitted she was wrongfully convicted and resentenced her, but she didn't even understand she was serving life without possibility of parole until she lost her mom and asked to go to the funeral. And the counselor said, "You're not leaving here any other way than toe tag. And I don't understand how you don't get that." And that's a horrible way to communicate to somebody. And this is a counselor. That's a horrible way to communicate to somebody when you're telling them that they just had a loss, as well as a way to communicate the sentence. And that's how she figured it out and was able to come and literally just cry going, can you help me? Because I don't even understand what this means. I'm like, wait, hold on, let's look at your paperwork. And it was true. It was a much horrible feeling than knowing my own sentence is telling someone else that is your sentence too. I will never forget that day. It was horrible to have to tell her. It was horrible to explain the process. But the truth was, her lawyer kept saying, you know, we're going to get you out of here at some point. Took 17 years, but it finally happened. But that is a lot of experience inside where, you know, they're trying to hold on to hope, but they just don't know. So we're gonna move to the next slide, which is our mission statement for Drop LWOP. And so our mission is to end life without the possibility of parole in California. However, we're working with several different states as well. Our goal is to afford relief for those currently serving the sentence, no matter the conviction, through legislation change, commutation, pardon, resentencing, public awareness of the injustice of the sentence. A lot of people look at it and say, well, it's a step better than the death penalty, but the reality is it is a death penalty. It's just slower with less hope, with less accessibility. And obviously the death penalty is not a good sentence for anyone. Now that they're in general population, they're kind of on more even playing field. They just have an opportunity for legal reprieve in a way that somebody serving life without does not. That is their only difference now if they are in population. I want to just point out that we try to make sure, regardless of what the sentence is, because it's not up to us to judge what somebody did 20 years ago. It's up to us to remember that they're all individuals and we need to support them, whoever they are. And so on the next slide, we have been working with Life Without individuals for several different ways. We do current commutation applications. I get application requests every day. We have a packet of information that goes through how to fill out the application step by step, how to help family members write support letters, that kind of thing. Working on legislation, as well as trying to push our lovely governor to do more and act like his predecessor, and use this mechanism as it's intended, which is to offer relief to people who have done genuine change. And there are so many more individuals that we have inside that he could commute if he chose to, but it's also a matter of stepping up and looking outside your political aspirations in the future and looking to today. And what we have in the system is a whole bunch of individuals who have created change and deserve to have the same opportunity to be evaluated as the ones of us that have currently gotten out. And so we're hoping that we continue on that push. Luckily, we do have some DAs who are creating some of that change, not as fast as we want. And, of course, with opposition, but we also know that, it's not about taking from the victims, but healing doesn't happen with anger and revenge, and people change and grow, and we need to acknowledge that and how important that is as well. And so we continue to pressure people in our communities to push towards some reform. And on our next slide, we show several different examples of how the movements have worked and why they continue to work, because it's families, it's organizations, it's it's loved ones of families that commune together to find ways to look at the sentence a little bit differently. And so we've been blessed to have several different events occur. So this amazing photo here is all individuals who were commuted, standing at the Capitol, looking at ways to support people inside, but also to educate people on the fact that there are people out here now and there is hope. And so by letting families see this, we saw about a 20% increase of family members wanting to get involved in the movement and wanting to support loved ones at release, because before that they didn't see releases occurring. So it was pretty amazing to have this wonderful day at the Capitol. It literally happened a week before the pandemic happened. And so no one's seen each other except on Zoom since. Our next lovely slide is a follow-up to the first Living Chance photos that you saw at the top. This is all LWOPs that were commuted that now have an opportunity to speak to the community on a much broader basis, because we're all out. Instead of being inside working the movement, we're out here having an opportunity to educate about why the sentence is so horrible, and why we need to consider that every individual has the ability to grow, change, heal, have remorse, all the basic things that, I see somebody posted something about restorative justice. It has to be about looking at everyone as an individual, not as their past. We constantly hear we need to move away from our past, and yet if you consider how they sentence individuals with life without, it is definitely about holding on to what you did in the past and saying you have no ability to grow and change. One last thing I want to say about the sentence is it's extremely important to understand. A lot of people didn't even realize that they were creating the tough on crime laws that would end in these type of sentences. It isn't about, as I say, it's always about the victims first, but it isn't about the personal accountability for each individual on their part in a crime. It is absolutely about how many people can I convict. In our history for DAs, it's about how many convictions can I get. And if you have 5 people on one crime, 1 gun, 1 body, 1 bullet, how is all 5 people absolutely accountable for one person's thoughts or one person's mindset at that moment, or lack of mindset? As we said, a lot of people were juveniles at the time and not looking at the finality of their actions, just going on the emotion for the minute. And in every single example that you see up here, they were youthful age at the time that their crime was committed. And luckily the governor decided to give them another opportunity to do something differently. And we just hope that we get this governor to continue that process. And then I'm going to turn it back over.
So I'm gonna, I'd love to reserve a couple minutes at the end to give you a sense of what the coalition is very specifically working on and how people can get more involved. But I'm gonna stop the screen share now and see how much time we have for some questions before we go into the next part.
Well, thank you. What an extraordinary presentation. I know some of you. I met with Elisa. So here's what I want to contribute. First, I have a factual question and then a comment. You've mentioned people who have been released, even though it is life in prison without the possibility of parole. The people, the woman in the photograph and the others, they have only been released through commutation by the governor. Is that correct?
Yes, everybody but the one in the gray jacket. As a youthful offender, they changed, or the black jacket, they changed for youthful offenders to have an opportunity to go to board. And so she was lucky to get out that way because she was under 18 at the time of the crime, but everybody else was all commuted by the governor.
So look, we're all among friends who are fighting for justice. And I am one of those people that has spent a lot of time fighting the death penalty. And I know virtually everybody on this screen has done that. I'd like to kick off today, but we're going to have to do this more extensively with all of you. We need a strategy to end the death penalty and end LWOP. The tension has come through the surveys that show when you tell the public that there's an alternative to the death penalty, namely LWOP, that opposition to the death penalty increases, and we've come within a few percentage points of abolishing the death penalty, as your slides indicated, when LWOP is in those initiatives, because that gives some voters a sense of safety, if you will. I believe every state that has the death penalty has LWOP. Are there models of other countries or other ways, if we were to launch a death penalty abolition initiative that did not endorse LWOP, but endorsed other alternatives to the death penalty that did not involve LWOP, we may be able to attract the same members of the voting public to once and for all end the death penalty. So I'm eager creatively to find ways that we recognize all of the injustices of LWOP, that we also recognize the terrible finality of the death penalty, and look for a way to frame an initiative in the future that will not have a knee-jerk reaction to use LWOP as the alternative, but to offer certain sentences and certainly to offer the opportunity for rehabilitation and restorative justice. So I didn't know if Kelly or Elisa or others had comments on that.
Yeah, I've been working hard on this question. There's a lot of battle about the role of the Board of Prison Hearings, and if there's a number that can be produced that says, okay, so they go after this time. I'll be honest, it is none of those individuals got out just based on a release. They all had to go through board after they were commuted. And so the idea that maybe it's a board mechanism that is in place, just like everyone else, that allows for that safeguard for the community to say, okay, there is a step. So that's where we're kind of leaning to, is giving a base term for board. I used to say 30 because that used to be the process. I get yelled at a lot, but that's too long. But I'll be honest, I fought for 23 years to have an opportunity to go to board. And I was glad to be able to have that opportunity. And, there are people who are, scared of board, but if you're honest and you're real with yourself and you're doing the work, you go in there and tell your story and go in there with the truth. And hopefully, you've done the work. But the truth is, because it's so hard to get into groups, it's 1,000 times harder for men. But because it's so hard and you feel like you don't have no hope, people are fighting now to get in where they weren't before. But I would definitely love to have more of a conversation about that. And yes, it's definitely something I work with the Death Penalty Coalition as often as I can. I try to attend meetings, but it's important.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Kelly said regarding the number of years. I was in prison myself for 16 years, and it was a lifetime already. Nationally, there is a really strong movement that is developing that is against extreme sentencing. It's being called together nationally by the Sentencing Project, and their national kind of standard or their slogan is 20 years is enough. And so that is really the number that is being floated nationally and has some consensus among activists against extreme sentencing. Although my personal belief is that people should be eligible for parole far earlier.
Thanks, Linda. Phil is next, and then I have my hand up too, and Geraldine.
Okay, I'm just finding myself wondering what horrendous crimes do women commit that leads them to a LWOP sentence. These guys aren't, they're not Charlie Mansons. I'm guessing that most of the crimes committed were momentary, circumstantial kinds of crimes. And can anybody clarify that?
Yes, definitely. So for my situation, I was trying to leave a domestic violence situation. And the truth is he murdered my son and was about to murder me. And I had life without the possibility of parole. Because I should have known he would be psychotic someday. I should have known he had started using meth. And I try not to harm people with that part, but great question. As I said, with Christina, she was out in the car and had no idea that somebody going into a house was going to end up in a fight that ended up with a death. He ended up taking $25 off of the man after they got in a fight, not knowing that the man was going to die later that day. And so it becomes a robbery. What they did when they started doing their tough on crime is they started making all these other ways to make special circumstances an offense that was a capital offense. So individuals in a gang related crime normally will go automatically to life without the possibility of parole. Anything that has a robbery component to it. So you're going into a rob a store. I have one friend who the police shot her boyfriend when they were leaving the store. She's now doing life without because the police shot her boyfriend because it was a robbery. So there's a lot of different circumstances that the community doesn't understand. And as she says, it is my fault that I went in to rob the store. So yes, I completely, accept responsibility. I went into the store with him. We didn't harm anybody, but we did get the $150. When he passed away, it was in his pocket. She is now doing life without the possibility of parole. So those are just a couple examples of individuals being sentenced. Anything related to an officer is automatically going to be life without.
Thank you. I want to speak briefly. I went to a Drop LWOP event here in LA probably almost 2 years ago now, and I went basically because I saw it was being sponsored by California Coalition for Women Prisoners, which I had known people up in the Bay Area and down in San Diego. I wasn't even aware there was a chapter here. And the event was co-sponsored by CCWP and Fuel, the Families United to End LWOP. And it made such an impression on me for the reasons people are seeing here. And I want to emphasize there are also 5,000 men. I mean, we're hearing from the women here today, but at that event, even though it was sponsored by CCWP, there were men who had gotten out. The letter I mentioned is from a man. His last name is Rose Aminifu, and I want to draw attention to what Kelly said, that when the governor commutes the sentence, he's not releasing them. He's only ending the aspect that is without parole. And then they have to qualify for parole. In general, the governor is not being asked to put people out in the street himself. It's just to end that aspect of it. And I just wanted, the power of this, I think, is so tremendous. I think it is. It speaks to the nature of incarceration in general, and one of the reasons I respond to it is for having done work around the uh, hunger strike and the ending solitary confinement. I think this is another form of torture, really, inside the prison. It's a prison within a prison, and it's a mental prison, and we it's really vital, and just the power of what we're seeing is growing. The families getting involved, the prisoners inside organizing themselves. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. We do orient as ICJP to action, and I think we should join the coalition. I'll just, unless somebody wants to comment, I'll just pass to the next. I think Geraldine had her hand up, and then Joe.
Yes, thank you so much for being here and doing this presentation. One of my other hats is I'm my council person's appointment to the Domestic Violence Task Force for the city. And I'm very, very aware that a large majority, a huge majority of the women that are in prison is behind domestic violence. Saying this as a huge supporter of restorative justice as a way of reforming the criminal justice system. I thought I was under the impression that several years ago, because I worked on this legislation to eliminate LWOP for the juvenile justice system. So am I functioning under an incorrect thing here that for folks under 25 that LWOP was eliminated? That's
Yeah, so well, two different things. I worked, one of the things the governor recommended and encouraged me to do is make sure that my groups on domestic violence that I created inside stayed active when I left, and I'm very proud of that work and all the movements with that. And I wish there was a shelter that was available to me. Unfortunately, the shelter was in the nearest town was in Fresno, and it was too far away, so they couldn't help me that day. And unfortunately, but at the same time, I need to make sure that everyone else getting incarcerated knows the steps and how to protect themselves. And sadly, even the domestic violence law that was created doesn't help a lot of the individuals because the counties don't want to do the work. And I was fighting that until I was commuted. For individuals who were sentenced under 18, it is helping them as a juvenile, as we had in the slide, one of our individuals was released. However, if you're LWOP, it doesn't count for you. It only counts for any other individual under the age of 26. They qualify under the juvenile law. And so we're trying, and we hope that that changes at some point, because how do you say just because the DA went after life without the possibility of parole that your brain developed in a different manner than the cellmate next to you who was also under 26? It's absolutely irresponsible for the state to continue in this way. And there's several judges that are asking for legislation to change, but until it changes, judges' hands are tied, unfortunately. And so they're asking for it. There's several cases going through the courts right now. Unfortunately, because the law has not changed, there's nothing they can do.
So we need to change the law.
Yes, definitely. And we're working with Human Rights Watch, who did the initial one, and they have an LWOP project, a little bit different than the drop. They support Drop LWOP, but the difference is it's all solely individuals serving life that serve to life without the possibility of parole in an organization to educate the community about why it's important. And so they're training us now to learn how to communicate, to legislators and things of that nature.
The stories that you're telling expose so many rotten aspects of the system, all along the line, and of course LWOP itself. But things like you say, if an officer is involved, your sentence is going to be much higher. don't all lives matter in that way, and equally so. And the system that's supposed to be supporting human rights for everybody ought to take care of that. Prosecutorial discretion you mentioned. And if we didn't have such a draconian criminal justice system, people would be ready to speak up, let's say, in domestic violence situations much sooner without fear of dangerous and deadly policing and extreme sentencing falling down on maybe their family members or beloved people. So just all along the line, these also another thing is male rule. The women who are defying male rule seem to get it a lot worse too. So all along the line, those are parts of this. They go together. But I have a simple question. Is the exclusion from educational programs in California, a CDCR regulation, or does that require legislation? There is something that can show the humanity of the people, recognize their humanity every day by letting them get access to programs. Of course, some people will resist that. They'll say because it's a waste of investment. I think it's because they don't want to recognize the humanity, because then they'll have to change the whole system. But do you happen to know whether that exclusion from educational and similar programs is regulatory, or do we need legislation for that? Of course, we need a campaign on it anyway. Kelly, you're mute now.
Sorry. We actually are working on it on a different bill with Initiate Justice to allow and fight for programming. So we're working in several different areas because we know how important it is. And Initiate Justice is also part of the Drop LWOP campaign. It's just a different, component. Everybody's working on bills to support education inside, and at different components. What they need is they need both in each institution, but also through Sacramento, because Sacramento is the one that's saying, let's make sure people who are getting out first get it first.
Does that the department in Sacramento,
The
or
department.
is that the legislation in Sacramento? The whole department.
Yeah, the department.
And they're resisting. They're resisting it. So you need legislation. Is that it?
Probably, unfortunately, their CDCR is saying that there's nothing we can do because the community wants healing for people getting out first, or Prop 57 wants the opportunity to get people out. So if an LWOP doesn't get out or doesn't benefit from these classes, which just because you don't benefit with 2 weeks off credit doesn't mean you don't benefit emotionally, or you don't change your thought process.
Well,
but yeah.
Good question. What happens, what'll happen to them if they get education? That's a nice question. But what does it mean about us if they don't? If we don't allow it?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Especially when something, whether it's felony murder or another case law might get someone out for whatever reason. If they don't have that healing, they could be denied by that judge, or, if the juvenile bill ends up going through, they could be denied based on the fact that they're not taking the classes they can't have access to.
Yeah,
and they tell you
better be scapegoats forever.
Yes. And,
idea.
Somebody asked the question about Friends Outside. Friends Outside provided parenting classes for the women. It happened very rarely, but it happened. You get denied at board for not having the class that the institution won't provide, but they will not allow an individual that's incarcerated to teach that class, but they know they need it and they know board requires it. So it's just an example.
So Elisa is saying, can we move to the last 5 slides?
So the last few slides are very specifically what we're going to be working on in the next year or so, and also how different groups and individuals can get more involved. So we do actually have legislation this year, which is a first for the coalition. We're working in partnership with Fuel, Felony Murder Elimination Project, CCWP, Ella Baker Center, on SB 300. And this has been alluded to a couple times in our conversation, but district attorneys have this incredibly broad leeway to charge somebody with something called felony murder special circumstances if they participated in a felony that resulted in a death that was either intentional or accidental, and they don't have to have actually killed anyone. But they can still be charged with felony murder special circumstances. And that charge, if someone is convicted, the only two options for sentencing are the death penalty or life without the possibility of parole. So this legislation is going to chip away at that a little bit. So it will prevent district attorneys from charging an aider or abettor with felony murder special circumstances. And it's also, and this is really important, it's going to allow judges discretion to take off a special circumstance. It will also allow judges to revisit older cases and review them to potentially remove that special circumstance so that somebody can have their sentence changed from life without parole to life with parole. The other thing that we're focused on, because we can reduce life without parole via legislation bit by bit. We can also reduce the impact of life without parole via commutations. So this is not broad-based for all 5,000 people, but individuals can apply for commutation from the governor. The governor can change their sentence, and then they might be eligible for parole. And we are especially excited to work with faith groups and people of faith, particularly on this effort, because we feel like many people of faith very intrinsically understand the concept of a second chance, forgiveness, looking at the situation again. And so we really would like to partner with faith groups on this commutation campaign, or an ongoing commutation campaign towards the governor. We're also obviously supporting people who currently have life without parole and their families. That's ongoing work. Kelly's really involved with that. We are just beginning to work with the Progressive District Attorneys Alliance, supporting CHESA, supporting Gascon. And also at some point, we will probably be developing strategies to pressure more conservative DAs so that they cease sentencing people to LWOP, because that's another way that we could reduce the impact of LWOP. We could simply have district attorneys never use their powers to charge someone with a special circumstance that will result in a life without parole sentence. And then finally, we are connecting with groups throughout the country, because this is something that is developing momentum across the US. So here's some ways that you can help. So individuals, you can go to droplwop.com, and then you can go to the menu and you will connect with us. And that gives you the opportunity to sign up to be a part of the coalition individually, to get updates, to get action alerts. And you can also go to the website to sign our letter to Governor Newsom. It's an open letter, an ongoing open letter. If you really want to get involved, we have tons of ways that people can plug in. You can email droplwopoutreach@gmail.com. I will get that email. You can help people with commutation applications. You can be in ongoing communication and support people inside who have life without parole. You can organize online events, develop materials. You can do social media. You can help us reach out to other faith groups that you're involved in, particular congregations, synagogues, and other hope and faith-based groups. You can coordinate specific action campaigns or participate in them. You can communicate with other volunteers. You can organize meetings with elected officials. Those are some of the things that, if individually this is really calling to you, you can email me and I can help you get more involved. And then on the group level, again, email me, droplwopoutreach@gmail.com. We are just starting to develop kind of like a faith leadership group and a faith leadership partnership, so that we can really start to think of how we can move Governor Newsom to commute more sentences. And that is just developing. So we invite anybody to join with us in that. And then faith leaders, if you represent an organization, you can go to our website and sign our letter to Governor Newsom on behalf of your whole organization. You can join our coalition. You can come to our strategy meetings if you'd like. You can organize more educational presentations to other groups. You can also send a letter to Governor Newsom asking for more commutations, and we can support you in that if you need language. You can also support us in, as we are educating the public and representatives about SB 300. That is, we're really right at the beginning stages of that. We just got an author for the bill at the beginning of February. So we don't have super specific information yet about how we're going to be meeting with legislators, but that will be coming. And if you email me, I can make sure you get information. So in closing, ending LWOP is not going to automatically allow people to leave prison. But if we end life without parole, what we're doing is we're recognizing every person's capacity to grow and change and evolve. We're giving people another chance and another opportunity. We are, we're undoing this idea that the people that have LWOP are bad and they were the perpetrator, because a lot of those people are also victims and they come from marginalized communities. We're also acknowledging that someone's past shouldn't indefinitely define someone's future. So ending LWOP provides hope. And this is pictures of people that have life without parole, most of them currently taken in prison. And so we'll close just thinking of all of these people.
Thank you so much. I'm really so glad we did this, and tremendously powerful presentation.